Hello, and welcome to an EAS Consulting Group webinar on facility registration and product listing for cosmetics. My name is Victoria Pankovich, Manager of Regulatory Services with EAS, and I'm joined today by EAS independent consultants John and Catherine Bailey. Today's webinar is on facility registration and product listing for cosmetics under MOCRA, the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act. The new requirements enacted under MOCRA become effective beginning December 29th, 2023. First among these will be a requirement for cosmetic facilities to register and for cosmetic products to be listed with FDA. The FDA has issued guidance for facility registration and product listing and is now in the process of conducting beta testing for the data loading system. It is important for cosmetic manufacturers and marketers to be prepared to meet the December 29, 2023 deadline. This webinar will cover the latest from the FDA about facility registration and product listing and help companies prepare for MOCRA. We will address as many questions as possible during our Q&A session following the webinar. Please contact trainings@easconsultinggroup.com with any additional questions. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, John Bailey Jr., PhD. John is a former director of FDA's Office of Cosmetics and Colors. He has served in other prominent agency positions, including director of the Office of Applied Research and Safety Assessment in the Office of Science. After his retirement from the FDA in 2002, he joined the Cosmetic Toiletry and Fragrance Association as Director of Cosmetic Chemistry, and later joined the Personal Care Products Council as Executive Vice President for Science. Take it away, John.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay, what I'm going to do is provide a brief introduction and overview of where we are right now, and leading up to that with some background, what's coming soon, and then we'll talk about what's coming later. And so next slide, please. So FDA's mission is to protect the public health, and information that the agency collects helps them with the activities related to identifying companies involved in cosmetic manufacturing and distributing, safety substantiation, post-market surveillance of adverse reactions, and also mandatory recall authority, which FDA has under MOCRA, and also monitoring of cosmetic products imported into the USA. So MOCRA, for the first time, will provide FDA with a very accurate picture of what the cosmetic market looks like and very clear connections to the companies and the products that are in the marketplace. Next slide. This is sort of a visualization of where we are now. MOCRA was enacted on December 29th, 2022. It was part of the huge spending bill that was passed at the end of the year, and actually came out, for me anyway, as something of a surprise, being included in the 5,000-page bill that was enacted. It profoundly changes the way that cosmetics are manufactured or regulated, and maybe even manufactured in the U.S. By adding a number of very important provisions. And 4 of these actually go into effect on December 29th, 2024. And the ones we'll be talking about today are product listing and facility registration. And these technically, companies are required to comply with these 2 requirements starting on December 29th. Also important in the provisions in MOCRA is the requirement to maintain records about adverse events and to retain those records for 6 years. There are some exceptions, but primarily for 6 years, and make them available to FDA on request through an inspection or other vehicle. It also imposes a requirement that if there's a serious adverse event, and MOCR defines what serious means, it has to be reported to the agency within 15 days. And then there are provisions for how to assess that and what might happen with that particular adverse event report, including amending it. So it's these two provisions of the adverse event reporting will have a strong record keeping burden on the industry, and also provides FDA with access to records that you may have. It's also important to understand when you're dealing with a law amending the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, that failure to do this, to meet these requirements, becomes a violation of the act and subject to the penalties that the agency has at its hand for doing that. Another important one is safety substantiation. Starting on December 29th, there will be a requirement to maintain records supporting adequate substantiation of safety for products. And that will also be subject to FDA access during inspections or other types of needs that the agency may identify. The agency has not come out yet with what constitutes adequate substantiation of safety. Number of times the agency has been asked, and they really have not provided any detailed guidance or what the expectations are, other than to identify some sources that you might access. So that's one to keep an eye on as well. In addition, there are other requirements that kick in later. The one that has, I think, to me, the biggest impact is good manufacturing practice regulation, kind of like drugs and foods, which allows FDA to conduct inspections against the regulation and gives them authority that if they find violations of a GMP rule, that they can take certain steps. So anyway, as you can imagine, we're very busy. We're focusing today on the two parts of listing and registration. And so you're going to hear a lot of information about that. And we will try our best to answer questions that you have. So I will hand it over now to Kitty to continue.
Hi, yes, let me introduce Kitty. Our next speaker is Catherine Bailey. Kitty is a former director of FDA's Division of Cosmetics and Compliance and served as the staff scientist for the Personal Care Products Council, where she participated in preparation of the International Color Handbook 4th edition and International Cosmetic Legal and Regulatory Database. Welcome, Kitty.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this FDA guidance. I've included the docket number up here. This came about from a Federal Register document that FDA posted on August 7th and gave until September 7th to receive comments. And yet one thing that might be helpful, if you have your guidance document in front of you, I'm going to talk from a few points in there. So if you have it in front of you, notice that at the top of each page, it says contains non-binding recommendations, and that this is a draft, it's not for implementation. And that's because FDA is asking for comments. The guidance, FDA's guidance documents in general, I can say this about most of them, they don't establish legally enforceable responsibilities. They're basically the current thinking on a topic, and they're only used as recommendations unless there's some specific statutory requirement that's cited. Also, as you read through the draft, if you see the word should, that means that something is suggested or recommended, but it's not required. So if you look at this first link, this is where you can go to download the guidance. You can see the Federal Register notice there. You can, importantly, this is the link that you would use to get updates. In other words, find out what's the newest event that FDA has added to the whole MOCRA initiative. Now, obviously, FDA usually also gives press releases, and they'll send out notices to affected industries too. So the news will spread that way. The comment period, as I said, went to September 7th, and we received about, or FDA received about 40 comments. I don't know if any of you are familiar with regulations.gov in the next bullet, but that is the site where all federal initiatives are housed, and where you can go and provide comments or see what comments other people have made. And importantly, you'll notice that this docket has a particular number and begins with FDA's, and that characterizes the agency that's involved. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the definitions. And if you look at the guidance on pages 4 through 6, they have a number of definitions that are given in alphabetical order. FDA plans to use these in implementing their new regulations. Now, in other words, you can expect some changes to what's currently in 21 CFR Part 700.3, where the definitions are. So some of these are probably going to change. And FDA in this guidance gives 9 definitions. Most are explanatory, but I want to talk about just a few today. What I'd start with is a cosmetic product. And again, this is a change from what's currently in 700.3b. The cosmetic product is now described as a preparation of cosmetic ingredients with a qualitatively and quantitatively set composition for use in a finished product. So they enlarged on that just a little bit. One of the key points I want to talk about is a facility. What is a facility? And this includes any establishment, including the establishment of an importer that manufactures or processes cosmetic products distributed in the United States. Now, that's pretty broad. But what it does not include are, and these are listed in the guidance as well, things like places like beauty shops, salons, cosmetic product retailers, hospitals, public health agencies, hotels, airlines, trade shows, an establishment that manufactures or processes cosmetic products that are solely for use in research or evaluation, including for production testing, and not offered for retail sale. That's a key piece there. Now, they also point out here what the facility, another piece that a facility does not include, and that's one that solely performs one of them or more of the following with respect to cosmetic products. And there's 6 of these: labeling, relabeling, packaging, repackaging, holding, or distributing. And then notice that continuing with the guidance description on the next page, I think it is, they say the terms packaging and repackaging do not include filling a product container with a cosmetic product. So that's pretty clear, I think, of what is and is not a facility. But another important point we need to talk about is what is manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product. And again, I'll take you back to 700.3, where in the definitions currently in the CFR, the term manufacturer is defined, but now MOCRA is suggesting in the guidance, they're suggesting that it's manufacturing or processing, in other words, 2 active processes. And it's basically the same idea, but manufacturing or processing means engaging in one or more steps in the making, and this is where the definition picks up, the making of any cosmetic product by chemical, physical, biological, or other procedures, including manipulation, sampling, testing, or control procedures applied to the product. So again, this is your new proposed definition. So back to the definitions. The next one I'll highlight is responsible person. This is the manufacturer, packer, distributor whose name appears on the label. And that's of the finished cosmetic product. And this is the person, the responsible person is the one who submits a product listing. Now, they also have to obviously register their firm, but they will also have to submit this product listing. Right, next slide. So who must register? And if you say and submit a product listing, that would be the responsible person. But registration applies to who owns or operates a facility that engages in the manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product for distribution in the US. And that's a pretty broad definition. It does exclude a small business. And this is going to look back at your definition, but also let me pull this up. Okay, small business exemption. Responsible persons and owners and operators of facilities whose average gross annual sales in the US of cosmetic products for the previous 3-year period is less than $1 million adjusted for inflation, and who do not engage in the manufacturing or processing of the cosmetic products described in subsection B. And then it goes on there for other requirements. Importantly, this exemption does not apply to products that come into contact with the mucous membrane of the eye, that are injected, and you're thinking tattoos there, intended for internal use, that would be like mouthwash, or are intended to alter appearance for more than 24 hours, and removal by the consumer is not part of the intended conditions of use. So there's your small business exemption, and as you see, there are a number of functions that are not going to fall under the small business exemption. Also, the exception is for a facility that's also subject to drugs and devices, and you'll hear a little bit more about that later. Okay, next slide. And again, submission of what, how, and when was going to be covered in part 3. Victoria will be discussing this in greater detail. The guidance is also includes an Appendix A, and I'd like to take just a minute to talk about that. And again, if you have your guidance in front of you, if you'll turn to page 12 through 15, you'll see that this Appendix A, and again, I'll call your attention to that it has a footnote that FDA has created this list of categories and codes and requests comment or additional categories or codes. So they're looking for information, and some has been provided, especially in comments that are in the docket. So what's really new here? Well, as you know, the categories are currently listed in 724C, and there were 12 of these. The usual: baby products, bath preparations, eye makeup preparations, and so forth. They may have been comprehensive to us, but there are now 17, and there's a lot more elaboration. The 5 that were included include makeup preparation for children, suntan preparations, tattoo preparation, as well as that famous category called other. So if you look at this list, there, it seems to go on and on. And I counted, if you go line by line, there are about 6 new lines that are added in this cosmetic product categories and codes too, of course.
Those product identifiers.
Product identifiers. Thank you, John. So some of the comments did provide additions and suggestions for these product codes, and I don't think this is by any stretch the end of the story. There will be opportunities to comment on these categories. Next slide. So I took a quick look at the comments to the docket that I mentioned in the first slide, and So what are some of the main ideas that you get? I took a sampling. No surprise here. There's a request for extending the December 23 deadline. The categories of products we just talked about. There's also concerns about FOIA. In other words, what information is that you're submitting is going to be considered releasable under Freedom of Information. So that has to be addressed. As FDA has said, they will provide information to the extent that they feel is reasonable, but you know that bears discussion and comments that they will want to hear from you about those types of concerns. So, and there are some comments in the docket, and I'll just mention this real quickly. Under the Administrative Procedures Act, when comments are sought, the agency is I won't say generally required, but they do in a Federal Register notice where they're proposing rulemaking, they will address those comments. So it's not like they just fall into a black hole. And then the last one of the last items was the U.S. agent. There was a request that actually be defined. It is defined, I think, for medical devices and some other categories of FDA regulated products, but it's not defined here for in this particular guidance. So next slide. We now move into part 3, and I'll let Victoria take it from here.
Thank you, Kitty. Hello again. So I'm going to handle the specifics of registration and product listing. We'll start with terminology. This slide just has terminology that you'll want to become familiar with for the electronic submission of your information. Cedar Direct is a platform where you can submit drug information. Cosmetics Direct is based on Cedar Direct, and that's going to be where you can submit cosmetic information, registrations, and listings only. And then FDA Direct is a combined program for companies that are going to be needing to submit both drugs and cosmetic information to the FDA. So the FDA has come up with a combined program for those companies, so they don't have to have two separate accounts with Cedar Direct and Cosmetics Direct if they want to just have one platform to submit information. And the rest of this information is just, we're going to provide a printout of these slides. So this is just sort of information you can look over when you get them. So unique facility identifier is a DUNS number, which is assigned by Dun & Bradstreet, and that's for each physical location of a business. We run into questions about this a lot. We have clients that want to use their headquarters DUNS number for all of the information they provide to the FDA for registrations, and that is not acceptable. The physical location of the facility you're registering has to have its own unique Dun & Bradstreet DUNS number for that location, and that has to be submitted to the FDA. That's for drugs and medical devices. Right now, it's optional for cosmetics, but something to be aware of. It's entirely possible that will be mandatory down the road. It just became mandatory for food facility registrations within the last 2 years. So something to be aware of, that is required. If you're going to have an Cedar Direct account or an FDA Direct account, you do need to have a DUNS number to submit for that request. If you're going to have Cosmetics Direct only account, you do not have to have a DUNS number. That's just optional information. And FEI, this is probably the most critical piece for right now, something you can be doing while the FDA is still working on their program. That stands for FDA Establishment Identifier. The FDA has a portal. I have a little link here. Hopefully it works for our presentation. You'll want to go to this portal and see if your facility already has an FEI assigned to you. So you'll just follow the link, you create an account, and then once you log in, you can look up your facility and see if it has an FEI number assigned to it already. If it does not, then you will contact the FDA at FEI portal at fda.hhs.gov and request one be assigned for you, because you're going to need that number prior to registering your facility. And so our next slide is going to show you the information that is required to send to the FDA in order to get an FEI assigned to your facility or to your company. I won't read through everything. You can see all of this, but it will be very important to include your DBA number or names, if there's any of those. If the physical address has ever been registered with the FDA in the past, and if so, if it had an FEI number assigned to it, and if the firm has ever been registered with the FDA, and if it had an FEI number assigned to it. And this is just continuation of the information that will be required for an FEI assignment. If you do not already know that this week, to make sure. Now, who must register? Kitty did talk about this already. It's very important to understand that the exemption for a small business has an exception. So it does not apply to your business. I'm just going to read them again. I know Kitty already did, but I think this is very important. It's to understand that a small business still has to register if you make cosmetic products that fall under cosmetics that regularly come into contact with mucous membrane of the eye under conditions of use that are customary, cosmetic products that are injected, cosmetic products that are intended for internal use, or cosmetic products that are intended to alter appearance for more than 24 hours. If that's the case, the small business exemption is not applicable to your company and your facility. And you do not have to register if your facility manufactures cosmetics that are also considered drugs, such as makeup that has an SPF in it, sunscreen protection, or chapstick or something that has sunscreen in it. That would be an example. If that's the case, then you fall under CDER, and you will have assigned an NDC number to that product, and you will have already registered and listed with the FDA for drugs. If you have a facility that manufactures those type of products, as well as straight cosmetics, just creams and lotions that wouldn't be considered a drug, then you're going to have 2 registrations, one with CDER Direct or one with CDER, and then one with cosmetics. All right, so moving on. And then here we've just articulated what information is required for your establishment registration. Again, this is so you can start pulling all of this information together. The program isn't available yet, but you want to have all of this information pulled together so that when it is live, you can start submitting everything in a timely fashion. And this is optional information that the FDA is requesting, but it's not required. You see here that DUNS number is requested. So that's why I'm thinking it's possible down the road it is going to become a required field. So just something to be aware of and start familiarizing yourself with. All right, and then these are the different sections of Cosmetics Direct. I'm going to hopefully again follow my link. Okay, and this is screenshots of the program that the FDA is working on called Cosmetics Direct. As you see, there's 81 slides. It's just impossible to go over this entire thing.
I apologize.
Yes.
With the screen share, you're still
Yeah.
on the PowerPoint app.
Oh gosh, thank you. I know that's what I needed.
Mhm.
Good information. All right, let me see if I can share. Oh, there we go. Okay, can we see Cosmetics Direct now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So this is 81 slides. The FDA, put a lot of effort into this, so they give you a lot of information. We're going to include a link to this. So if you haven't already looked at this and you're considering using Cosmetics Direct, you really should look these over. I'm going to jump to 8, which is the registration section, and just sort of leaf through just a little bit so you can see how detailed the information they're giving you about the system. It's very good. They have a whole self-help section. And as you see here, it says registration of cosmetic product facility. And then this is the area where you're going to either create a new file or upload an existing file. Another, and I'm just, again, just going to leaf through, you can just kind of look at these, but I did want to talk about the set ID. So in this system, it's going to be very much like Cedar Direct for drugs. The set ID, as it was explained to me when I first started doing listings, you kind of think of it as a social security number for your listing. If you need to make a change to your listing, you have to have this number in order to do it. So, if your record keeping gets a little spotty, this is something to make sure you have, because every other field can be updated. You can work through and figure out what it used to be and get it back to where it needs to be. But if you do not have the set ID, you're not going to be able to make an update to your listing. You can get it from the FDA. You can request it from the FDA if you lose your records, but something important to just keep in mind going forward. Set ID, very important. And then these are just more of this fields that you'll see. And as you can see, the FDA has, done a lot of pointing out and trying to explain what all of these different things are. So you'll want to look that over when you have a chance. Oops, sorry, I stopped sharing too quickly. And go back to our presentation. Okay.
Victoria, we view it in presenter mode. You need to just share the screen.
Okay. So yeah, sorry. That's all right. Well, let's get out of there and share. All right, do I have it? No? Yes.
That is the PowerPoint.
Okay.
But now we need the.
Yeah, I need to get back to where I was. So I've got it up. Oh, that's interesting. All right, well, let me just stop.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that. We got it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, sorry about that. Technical. Thanks, Jessica. Okay. So now the timing of the registration. If your facility was already engaged in manufacturing and processing cosmetics on December 29th of 2022, you are required to submit your registration no later than December 29th, 2023. And for establishments that began operations after December 29th, 2022, submission is required within 60 days of first engaging in manufacturing or processing, or by February 27th of 2024, whichever date is later, which is unusual, but that's where the FDA here is trying to accommodate, just new registrations for this year. It won't be required until February 27th of 2024. After that date, you'll have 60 days to get registered. An amended registration should be updated in the system within 60 days of such a change. That includes cancellation of a registration. It's very important to understand, if you are going to deregister your facility, you can't just not re-register it. You need to go in and submit a deregistration to the FDA. And then renewal of the registrations will be biennially every 2 years. The way that works is it's every 2 years from the registration period, which generally runs, I'm assuming they're going to do it the same as every other registration type, which runs from October to December annually. So if you submit a registration, say in March or April, your renewal is still going to fall between October and December. You don't have 2 years from the March or April. You have to fall, you get yourself in line with the every 2 years during the renewal period, if that makes sense. And then who must list what? The responsible person, as Kitty pointed out, needs to list, and that is the company whose name appears on the label of the cosmetic and whose contact information is there. Very important to clarify that. It may be the manufacturer or it may be a marketing entity. It is the person whose name appears on the label. And then the cosmetic product. Okay, so it's actually each cosmetic. product listing required. Here we go. This is the required information. It's quite a bit more for the listing as it was more than it was in the registration. You will need to get the FEI number for private label distributors of your manufacturing facility or facilities, because that information is going to have to be submitted. And this is more of the information that's continued. And this is the optional information, again, requested by the FDA, but not required at this point in time. So product listing number is one of the required fields. That is something that's going to be automatically assigned by the system. You don't have to come up with that yourself. The system will assign it, but you do need to start tracking it. Once it's assigned, you need to understand which product that number belongs to in your supply. Sorry. Okay, product number continued. Again, any changes to your product formulations will need to be uploaded into the system, and the FDA is asking for that annually. You can certainly do it sooner than annually. And there is an abbreviated process for renewal of cosmetics when there wasn't a change. They're doing that, I think, similar to how they do the drug listings. I should also mention it's possible to do, the FDA is working on a group submission for products that are very similar in formulation, and just the only variance is maybe a shade of the color or a fragrance. We'll have to see how that comes out, though, because I don't know how that will work right now. I was really hoping the system was already live, so we would have been able to have gone through it and then give you more detailed information, but right now it's all still fairly theoretical. This is an example of a complete listing, what it will look like. And again, we'll send these slides so that you can review this more closely in your own time. And then the product listing sections of Cosmetics Direct, you'll have the document type details, the cosmetic products, the confirmation statement, and additional contact information. And I'm not going to follow our slides because I got all confused last time. Sorry about that. I'm apparently not technically savvy enough to do that. So once you submit your file in the system, you usually get a response within 20 minutes. If the feedback shows you errors, a validation error, it's going to tell you where the validation error is, and you'll just have to troubleshoot and figure out, what you put in that is not being accepted by the system. And then there's also a self-help section. I didn't mention, I forgot to put that slide. I'm sorry. The FDA has released recently an SPL document, which I think will be very confusing for people. It's extremely technical and looks more like a coding document. However, if you're having issues with error codes, that is the document that you're going to want to refer to. And we can include a link in that with the information that we provide to you. And then if your information is accepted for your registration and or your listing, it's usually you'll get a response within 20 minutes from the system. Again, this is based on Cedar Direct. We're assuming Cosmetics Direct will do the same thing. Extremely important to understand, acceptance of your cosmetic listing into the system is not the same as an approval by the FDA or a license by the FDA for your cosmetic product. It just means that you've submitted the information that was requested in the form that the FDA requested. There is no one reviewing these submissions and reviewing them and looking them and saying, yes, this is fine. It's just the system saying, yes, they plugged all the information into the right fields. So your product is now listed. So what's next? As I mentioned, we'll include a link to the Cosmetics Direct draft screenshot so you can look through that and maybe try and familiarize yourself with the system before it goes live. You can also use Xforms and a WebTrader account to submit these files electronically to the FDA. And of course, you could hire a consultant either to assist you with the training on the systems or to process on your company's behalf. And now we will move on to our questions.
Right.
Before we go to questions, I just wanted to provide a little bit more update of where things stand. And I did query FDA before the today's webinar about if they had a go live date. And they said basically no, and referred me to their MOCRA website. So they are not giving any indication at this point about when this will go live so that companies can start entering their data into the systems. On further inquiry, the beta test that was scheduled to be completed in October has not even started. The beta test was an opportunity for several companies, I think it was 9 or 10, to test the system out and to see how it performed and maybe inform improvements and changes. So at this point, we do not know when it's going to go live, and based on past FDA experience, if this bumps up against the December 29th date, in other words, it's still not turned on and operational, then they may have to exercise enforcement discretion. But only FDA can say that. They have to announce that we are exercising enforcement discretion for X period of time while they iron out all the wrinkles in the system, which I think there are going to be quite a few. It's been estimated by some that they're talking about between 500 and 600,000 entries that will have to go into the system. And that is a massive number. It's not like nothing I think they've ever seen before, maybe even for foods. So, but the point is that we're keeping a close eye on this, and we'll certainly alert everyone when this actually is available to start entering data. So anyway, that's the current status as far as we know.
Okay, thank you, John. So we'll move on to the questions. I think this first one will go to you, John. This question comes from Corinne Snyder. Do cosmetic products need to be formally and/or externally tested for stability? If it does not need to be stability tested externally, is there any specific requirement to test the products internally for stability?
I think stability test is an integral part of product development, based on my experience. And I think that conducting stability testing at the least for your own internal purposes is a very wise thing to do. If there is an indication that the product needs specific guidance or directions for safe use that include stability information like use before or whatever would be the right language, then you would want to be sure that you put that on there, because FDA, in looking at the safety dossiers right now, they're only going to be looking at for cause. They're going to, I think, again, we don't know everything yet. I think they're going to be using safety dossier examinations when there's an indication that a product has caused an adverse event or there may be some other need to do it. And they have that authority. They can come knock on your door and say, I want to see your safety dossier. So I think stability testing as part of a quality program makes a lot of sense. Now, there are lots of ways you can do it. You can use prototypes and other ways to address stability, but I think it should be included at least in the design stage.
Okay, this is a good follow-up question again for you, John. It says for safety documentation, is it enough to have SDS sheets for each cosmetic product, or are cosmetic product safety assessments, toxicology reports also needed?
I think, I wish I could answer that in a more concise way, but I think that MSDS sheets are not going to be, probably not going to be adequate to make out your full dossier. I think you're going to need certainly things for the ingredients that go in there. And then you're going to need an assessment of some type on the finished product after all those ingredients are assembled and ready to be marketed to consumers. So I think that's, that's kind of the way I see it. I think an important part of the safety dossier is going to be the CIR reviews for ingredient safety. We use those a lot in our consulting. I think if you have 10 ingredients and all 10 of them have a CIR review, and you stay within the boundaries of that review, because they're not flat reviews, they are conditioned upon the information that they are provided at the time, and you put those together, you should be in good shape. You're still going to need to look at the finished product to make sure that it is safe and do a battery of tests. And most testing labs can give you information on what kind of battery is needed. If you have an unusual product, things could be different. So just keep that in mind. Also, I want to throw in here, and it's going to be a bit maybe problematic, is that the injected products, the tattoos, this law seems almost designed to locate and identify tattoo products. They are cosmetics for regulatory purposes. And FDA has wrestled with the tattoo issue for a long time. But, that may require a whole different approach in terms of establishing safety of the tattoo itself and the pigments that go into it.
Thank you, Joan. I actually have a couple of questions that I think Katie might be able to answer for us. The first one is, who is a responsible person? Is it a natural person or the brand itself? So I actually would love to hear you clarify what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's if you look at the label of cosmetic products, you'll see that a company is frequently named as the on the principal display panel or information panel, and then it would be the person who would be the owner or the responsible individual for the corporation. Now, again, this is something that FDA would need to clarify. Now, John, do you have any additional thoughts on that one, or?
I've also wrestled with this, and I think that
That's a tough one.
That if your product says manufactured by Acme Cosmetics, then the responsible person is Acme Cosmetics. And then you have to identify somebody who's the representative of Acme Cosmetics when you do your filings. And the responsible person is going to have to attest to the accuracy and validity of the information that's submitted. There's a place on the form that says, I certify, and there's a box to check, the agree box on the, you'll see it on the hard copies. So I think it's the company, but obviously somebody from that company has to be designated as the responsible person for that product label, Acme Cosmetics.
So what you're saying is it might be two responsible person categories, really.
There could, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks. And then another question, we're being asked to provide an example of a product that's intended to alter the appearance of skin for more than 24 hours. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is a henna tattoo. It's not permanent, but it's meant to last more than 24 hours. I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that one.
Yes, it caught my eye immediately when I saw it, and it's like, So if you're marketing a moisturizer and it is supposed to smooth your skin by moisturizing the skin, plumping it up, I guess, and you claim that it's more than 24 hours effect, then I think your exemption to the exemption kicks in. And I think, I was really surprised to see this. It looks to me like it's intended to help FDA identify where products are making inappropriate drug claims for a product marketed as a cosmetic. And so I think it's, I will say, I'm pretty sure it is the intended use. Do you state on your label that this product is going to do this for more than 24 hours? And so if it alters the appearance for more than 24 hours, then I think this provision can be interpreted to kick in. Whether FDA will actually pull the trigger on that one is anybody's guess at this point. But I think it's kind of interesting to me. Also, note in the product listing that included among the recommended information to provide FDA is an image of your label. I would think long and hard before I would provide FDA an image of the label. I don't know. I'm not sure what the benefit of that is for the agency, and it is discretionary. So I think you're going to need to get legal counsel as to if you want to do that, whether that's a wise thing to do or not.
But back to the original question and the henna tattoos, did you also think of theatrical makeup in that category?
Well, theatrical makeup is intended for the theater. So if you're going to do a performance, in the evening, and you're going to put on makeup of various types, that's not going to alter your appearance for more than 24 hours. It's just temporary, I think.
We do have a good follow-up question for that one. There is a company that has a lash serum that will plump lashes for more than 24 hours, and they're wondering if that would fit into the exception of the exemption. So it's a small business, but because that's the product they're manufacturing or processing, then they would not be able to be exempt, correct?
That's my interpretation.
That's our interpretation.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All righty, so that's our next question. Should the FEI number be for the manufacturing facility or corporate office? That would be for the manufacturing facility specifically. It's very specific to the facility that you are registering. Someone's asking if the FEI number will be the same for both OTC and cosmetic registrations. I can't say for certain, but I'm thinking it probably will be. I think if your facility has already been assigned an FDA establishment identifier, they will give you that same number. So again, if you go into the FEI portal and look up your facility and you see an FEI number, that is going to be what you're going to submit for your registration. Okay, I'm just going to scroll through our questions here real quick. Okay, so what requirements do importers need to be aware of for imports? FDA currently has not issued any guidance for registration listing requirements at time of entry. Do you have any thoughts on that, Kitty or John?
Isn't that where the U.S. agent comes into play?
Well, the U.S. agent has to be assigned to the facility, but that's not information that I think that will be supplied during an import. I'm guessing the importers are going to need to know the registration number of the manufacturing facility and possibly the listing number of the products they're importing. I'm again basing that on how drug registrations and listings are handled. But that is a good question. I would assume that an importer is going to need, again, the registration number and the listing number of any products that they're bringing into the country.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think,
think so.
I think that's exactly right, because any product that's marketed in the US is subject to MOCRA. And that means the product will have to be listed in the facility registered. And when you offer products for import, you have to provide information, and I can see the FDA eventually, maybe not at the beginning, but eventually adding to their forms, the registration listing numbers for that, and they, the inspectors at the point of entry can then confirm those, and maybe even confirm in real time that that's a valid number. I mean, this is all going to be digital at some point, and so I could see that becoming a part of the. And I think you're saying that's the case with drugs, right?
Yes, correct.
So I think
Yep.
that's very possible. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got someone asking if they're a manufacturer of private label customers, will the customer, oops, sorry, these things shift while I'm reading them and they lose it. Will the customer have to enter any formula information into the portal? They will have to list the ingredients, but that's already on the label. But there's no formulation like percentages or anything like that, correct, John and
Correct.
Kitty?
Right,
Right. These
Right.
are qualitative, not quantitative.
right.
Right. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question. Okay. Sorry. So someone asked when they're expected to go live, and we don't know that, and they're not really being forthcoming with that information.
They have a lot to do to turn that switch.
Right.
And it's what, November and December, you've got 2 months, 60 days, more or less, to get this thing up and running and running well enough that all that information can be entered. So we'll just keep an eye on it. If I were a betting person, I wouldn't bet the farm on it.
Right. Okay. So this is a good question. Is filling considered manufacturing and processing?
I don't
Yeah.
think it is.
Well, no, wait a minute, let me look back here. I think it is. It says, you're talking about facility now, the definition of a facility.
That's filling.
Yes.
That's filling, right?
Yes.
If you wouldn't be exempt if you're filling a product container, see?
Right. So they would be expected to register
Yeah,
as
that's
part of the manufacturing process.
That's my read of it.
Okay.
That would be my assumption. Again, I'm just basing this on OTC drugs. So yeah, we believe you would have to.
Okay.
Right, and that's under the definition of a facility, what it does not include.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And then should small businesses wait until they reach 1 million average sales to register? I think they probably can register. They just are not required to. So John and Kitty, do you have any thoughts on if there's any benefit or detriment to doing so if they're a small business?
I'm of the mind that if you don't have to, I wouldn't do it, but you need to be prepared
To do it.
to demonstrate that in fact you're a small business. So you want to make sure that in fact you meet the criteria of $1 million average over 3 years. In case FDA, because it's only that part, you're not exempt from some of the other key parts.
Right.
So it's just that part.
Right. Okay. And then do cosmetic, I think we covered this, but we'll just make sure we answer specifically. Do cosmetic products have to wait for FDA approval prior to going to market after submitting the listing information into the system? And again, your listing is just that. It's just submitting information to the FDA, you're not asking for approval, and the FDA is not giving approval. It's just a registration of your product with the FDA. So you do not have to wait for any, well, you do have to wait for the submission to be accepted, I guess. Going forward, right now, your products are already on the market, and you're just going to work through getting them all registered. But in future, when you have a new product and you're going to list it with the FDA, as soon as that listing is accepted by the system, it's fine to
Correct.
enter that into commercial.
I think
Right.
accepted by the system is the key word. I
Right.
know for the voluntary program that there were instances where someone would submit data into the voluntary program, and they would have an ingredient that was problematic, almost always color additives. So if you list a product and you include a color that is not approved for that listing, then that listing could be denied because it would be an illegal product according to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So as long as it's accepted, I think you're okay.
But we don't know how FDA is going to handle this listing of colors that are not approved.
Correct.
Right.
They have not clarified that.
And then we have a question on how foreign companies would register. It's the same as if you were a domestic company. You're going to submit all of your information. The only additional information you'll need to submit is your U.S. agent. I should have clarified. A U.S. agent, yeah, as John and Kitty mentioned, it may not be specifically detailed in the guidance documents. The FDA,
It's not.
specifically for cosmetics, but with food, medical devices, and drugs, the U.S. agent needs to physically be in the United States. They have to have a physical location in the United States. So it can't just be a satellite location, where your U.S. agent is just a named person and you have a call center or something where they're attached to. It has to be a person in the United States with an office location, and you have to have a dedicated phone line. It can't be an 800 number or a call center or something, or answering service or something like that. So hopefully that helps.
So someone has to answer the phone, in other words.
Yes. Somebody knowledgeable about your facility, because
Right.
your U.S. agent is going to be responding to the FDA on your behalf. So it has to be someone that is familiar with your business.
And not answering the phone is not an option.
Correct. The webinar recording will be available to view. I don't think you can download it, but you can certainly view it again.
Yes,
I'll
we will send
answer
a
that one.
follow-up email to everybody on behalf of trainings. We weren't able to get to everybody's questions, but we do have them down, and we will be reaching out to everybody to answer those individually. Thank you very much for joining us, and please be on the lookout for a survey, satisfaction survey, as well as the presentation and the link to the recording of the presentation.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, John, and thank you, Kitty. And everybody, we appreciate you joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you
Thank
very
you. You
much.
too.
Bye-bye.